new book out by local author Tony Renzoni. You may have recalled his bylines from the Connecticut Post over the years in print and online. Tony's new book, Connecticut softball legend Joan Joyce. And Tony joins us for a couple of minutes here. Hi, Tony. Paul here. How are you?
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Not too bad. What made you write this, Tony? What made you do this?
First of all, Paul, I want to say it's really cool to be back on ICC. As you mentioned, I worked in Bridgeport for many years, and I went to school there, lived there, and all that. But in terms of writing the book, Paul, I just felt that this is a story that must be told.
Yeah.
It's my hope that Joan Joyce will now get the true recognition that she deserves. The book is about the life and career of Joan Joyce. And as you know or may know, Joan Joyce is considered the greatest female athlete in sports history by many people, including myself. Now, I say that because she started on a very high level. Mm-hmm. She starred in softball, basketball, volleyball, golf, bowling, you name it. And her stats are off the charts. I won't I won't give you all of them because it's impossible in a half an hour, but just off the top of my head, 753 and 42 was her record. She pitched 150 no-hitters, 50 perfect games. She's in an incredible Hall of Fame, inductions of 20 Hall of Fames, which was amazing.
Yeah.
She broke the LPGA and PGA record of 17 putts in a single round of golf. That's for male and female, and it still stands today. And she set an AAU basketball record of 67 points. Now, what got me, I guess the question is what got me interested in Joan. Paul, after I finished my previous book, Connecticut Rock and Roll, I wanted to move in a different direction. And I got to talking to a friend of mine about growing up in Waterbury. We both grew up in Waterbury. And we started talking about Joan Joyce and how much we were in awe when we used to go see her pitch. And as we were talking, I'm thinking, man, this is a great story. I'd like to do a book on this. And so I researched, probably over 1,000 archives and over 10,000 photos of Joan and the Briquettes and the Falcons. So I thought, man, this is a real cool story to tell in a book.
And Tony, she was a star. I mean, there are a lot of younger people now who don't know about her in detail, or may have heard the name from their parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles. But in the days before the Yukon men and women dominated, in the days when the Hartford Whalers were a fledgling franchise in the WHA and in the NHL, Joan Joyce, when she pitched for the Stratford Briquettes, I mean, it was statewide news.
Oh yeah, oh sure, and not only Connecticut, but she was treated as a god when she went over to China and pitched over there in 1979 with the Falcons. They treated her like a god, and she pitched a no-hitter in front of 45,000 people. Mm-hmm. You're right. She was a fan favorite all across the United States and parts of China and parts of Europe. She was loved by her fans and teammates, and she was feared and respected by her rivals. And she was just the greatest. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on, and I don't know how much time you have.
No, go ahead.
But a lot of people associate Joan Joyce with striking out Ted Williams, which is totally true. Mm-hmm. And she faced him a number of times, and she struck him out. He couldn't touch her. And obviously, Ted Williams is the greatest hitter in baseball history. So I don't want to take away from that, but what I want to say to people even the people that know about this experience, of course, you talk to people, you swear 100,000 people were at that game. It was only 17,000.
It always right, Tony? It always happens. Everybody was there, yeah.
Everybody was there, right? But my point is that, and again, I've done a lot of research on her. I talked to her. We've had many, many discussions. And I go back earlier than that, Paul. I go back to 1958, and to me, this was amazing. She was only 17 years old, and maybe turned 18 a week before. And it was for the national championship. The Burkettes never won a national championship, but they were pretty confident because they had Bertha Reagan, who was their ace pitcher on the mound.
Yep.
Bertha goes down in the top of the third inning, and she has to be rushed to Bridgeport Hospital. So the coach comes over, and so they don't have a pitcher. And, again, she's only 17, 18 years old or whatever. And she was playing first base, and the coach comes over to Joan. And you have to know, knowing Joan now, you have to know how much confidence this person has.
Yeah.
So the coach comes over to it and says, Joan, how would you like to pitch? And, again, this is a pressure situation, championship game on the line. And she said, no problem. And so he put his arm around her and said, Joan, you may give up a few runs, and we'll get them back from her. Now, knowing Joan the way I know her now,
yeah,
I can just imagine what was going through her head, because she was probably saying, give up a few runs. That's not my game, because she had learned that slingshot method. Mm-hmm. So the first 10 batters that she faced, 7 of them struck out. And this was the Fresno Rockets, who were a dominant team. You have to remember the circumstances. They're the defending champions of the national championship. And then she walked the person, the 11th person who got thrown out at second, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
And then she mowed down the rest of the team. Now, you picture yourself at 17, 18 years old. She
17.
never pitched in a championship game before,
yeah,
and she was just lights out. Okay,
Tony, it's amazing. People talk for a minute, just before we go to a break here for about a minute, about the connection that the Bridgeport Stratford area had to this team. First of all, they were known from time to time as the Ray Bestis Breakettes when they had a corporate sponsorship, or the Stratford Breakettes. But for folks who may be younger, not really remembering all this, what was the connection like to the area?
The Ray Bestis Breakettes and Stratford in general was known as the mecca of softball, fast pitch softball. And they had their team, just the pitching alone, they had Bertha Reagan, Donna Lopiano, and Joan Joyce. I realize that people may not recognize the name, mm-hmm. but they were widely considered. And I interviewed a lot of people for this book, and rivals in addition to teammates, and they all agreed with me. This team was unbelievable, unbeatable.
So on a given night, how big were the crowds in Stratford on a given night?
On a given night in Stratford, I would say about they could pull in 17,000, 15,000 people. And they set the record in the tournament play, I believe. I can't remember the total number, 70,000, some crazy number like that. But also, Paul, you have to remember, every place that Joan went, this is how popular and how amazing she was. Mm-hmm. Every town that she went to, and when people heard that the Bestis Burkettes were coming to town,
it was an event.
And when they heard that Joan Joyce was going to pitch, she would fill up that stadium. Normally, they would pull in maybe 250 people.
Yeah.
When she showed up, there would be 10,000 people.
Tony Renzoni, name of the book, Connecticut softball legend Joan Joyce. And Tony was on hand for a lot of those games. Tony, as you said, as we're back with you, thousands of people going to the games. And I remember, Tony, I was just telling my producer, Aaron, here, it was as big at a point where I recall many of their games being on Connecticut public television, if I'm correct.
You know, that's true. And the unfortunate thing about that is I don't know what happened. I don't know if they taped over those games. I had the similar problem when I wrote Connecticut Rock and Roll. I wanted film clips of Connecticut Bandstand. And in those days, they just taped over those shows. So You're right. They did some of those shows. But just to touch on what you said before about younger people and even older people who sort of heard about her but may not remember or whatever, Joni, and I call her Joni, Joni is not the household name for many people, and for two valid reasons. First of all, in her day, there was no ESPN. That might be a shocker to younger listeners, but there was no ESPN at the time.
Yeah.
Newspapers did cover, but no TV or radio. Yes, CPTV, and I think ESPN did one or two games. Not ESPN, but another market. Mm-hmm. But secondly, and more importantly, Joni never promoted herself. She didn't believe in that. She called it the show. And just to give you an example, after she struck out Ted Williams those times, and I have to laugh because I got to know Joan and I know what she's like, and this is comical because to me anyway, mm-hmm. because they wanted her to go on tour and go on tour as kind of like a queen in her court,
like Eddie Feiner, the king of his court, yeah.
And Joni wanted no part of that. That she called that the show. She's not. You have to know Joni. She's down to earth, and she just, it's one pitch at a time, one basket at a time, that sort of thing. But, Paul, she did have mixed feelings about striking out Ted Williams those times because she felt in her heart of hearts she can strike this guy out anytime, any place. Yeah. Now, it's not to say that, don't get me wrong, Ted Williams is the greatest hitter ever. He could see the label on the ball coming in, so there's no question about that. But he met her match, his match. But she felt like, for the show, maybe I should give up a few hits or a home run or mm-hmm. something like that. But she told me over lunch, she said, Tony, I just couldn't do that. I was just so competitive. I knew I could strike him out. I had to strike him out. As a matter of fact, if my mother got up with a bat in her hand, I'd have to
strike her out too. Yeah, that's great. Tony, today, if Joan Joyce, Connecticut's own, if she fast forward her abilities today on the softball mound, as a basketball player, as an LPGA golfer, she would be if she allowed herself to be, Tony, she could very well be today the face of women's sports in America, if that's true.
No question about that. Joan is the greatest female athlete in sports history, hands down. She's in an elite class. Now, I'm not taking away from athletes like Serena Williams or Billie Jean King, who were dominant. But her only competition was this gal, Babe Dietrichson, and
Zaharias.
Zaharias, right? But you have to remember, Joan also refereed for 34 years. She coached golf for 18 years, and she coached sports for 60 years. Babe died at 45 and never really got involved in coaching. Mm-hmm. But also, she played in an era of male-dominated sports. But there's no question in my mind, and in many people's mind, including experts, that she would do very well, not only with in women's sports, but also in male sports.
Yeah. What is she? Tony? What is she doing today? She's still in coaching, correct?
Oh yeah. She, in fact, I just talked to her a little while ago. She is just coming home from California, where she was recruiting for her team. She's the head coach of the Florida Atlantic University softball team, women's softball team, and she's a very successful coach.
I saw her record. Do you think the girls who play for her, do they know the fame, you think, of the coach that they're playing for and her Connecticut roots?
I asked some of the players and her, and the answer is yes. At first, I had my doubts, but I guess once they knew who she was, they were in awe. And to just get to highlight how much they love her in Florida. She took her team, the first year she was the coach, she took her team to see the athletes prepare for the Olympics.
Okay. Yeah.
And the thought was that, maybe the team could see some of these players and get their autographs. Well, Paul, what happened? And this is when it hits home for the kids. What happened after the game, they all rushed over to Joan.
To get her autograph.
And get her autograph.
Oh, wow.
They wanted her to demonstrate that slingshot pitch. because they're in awe of her.
Can she still now? She's getting up there in age. Can she still bring it? Can she still throw strikes?
Oh, I don't know about that. I know she still has the method and everything.
Yeah.
But she would be the first to say that probably now. She's 79 years old.
Yeah, God bless her. God bless her. Listen, Tony, the book comes out today, correct? Now, it's called Connecticut Softball Legend, Joan Joyce by Tony Renzoni. Great read, arguably, folks, the greatest female athlete ever in the history of sports, right from the Stratford, Bridgeport area. We saw her play with the Ray Bestos Breakettes and her agility, too, bowling, golfing, basketball. How can people get a copy of this, Tony, if they want one?
Okay, it's just being released now. They can get a copy at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, R.J. Julia, and Madison, just about anywhere outlets, Paul. And I will say that the forward was written by LPGA golf great James Blaylock. Great athletes and celebrities like Billie Jean King contribute to the book.
Great.
And there's some very detailed interviews in there. But also, I wanted to mention, if I could, I'm going to be doing book signings. I'm starting in Waterbury, actually, her hometown.
Okay.
I'll be in Barnes & Noble in Waterbury on August 18th.
Mm-hmm.
Silence Bronson Library on September 14th. Milford, Barnes & Noble on the 15th, and those 14th and 15th and 16th books and book signings, be on guard because I might be bringing a special guest.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. All right. Listen, Tony, congratulations. Good luck with the book, and we'll be in touch in the future. Thank you.
It's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks. Once again, Connecticut softball legend Joan Joyce. The first book signing will be on the 18th, and Waterbury comes out today, and interesting. He said a special celebrity may be on hand. Who might that be? Let's see if she can pitch to you there, Johnson. See what might happen on the other side there.